Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Tim Bielik, Lance Reisland, part 2 of our draft talk here in our let's call this our summer draft series. I should have come up with that before the first pod, but we'll just call this our summer draft series here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. If you missed, we talked about quarterbacks earlier this week. Just hit our feed, Apple Podcast, Spotify to check that out. It's also up on our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. If you want to actually see us talk about these guys, you can watch it there. All right. We are talking non-quarterbacks here. So like I said, we went through the quarterbacks before. This is wide open. We're not going to go by position. We're not going to go by, you guys can take this wherever you want. Favorite prospect that you want to talk about. We'll go through a couple, throw out some wild cards. Tim, you let off our quarterback. So Lance, I'll have you go first here because who knows where Lance is going to take us. We want to be talking long snappers here in the next 30 seconds or so. Lance, what have you got?
Well, we did get to talk about the importance of long snappers in our
That's
pod
right.
last week.
Check out the football 101s that went up 4th of July week. Check those out.
So I'm gonna say this is gonna I'm gonna stay to my roots here, and I always like to talk about O-line, D-line, right? Because I don't care what level of football you're at, you win up front. And I would say right now my top. First of all, if you're an O-line guy or if you like physical football, go watch Utah football. They give you the feels up front. They have 5 guys up front who are absolutely nasty, and they run the ball. Very pro style offense. One of my favorite film breakdowns of the year. I'm very early into my film stuff, but they're my favorite group to watch right now. And my favorite guy to watch on there is Spencer Fano. So that my first guy I'm going to talk about now is a flex tackle, play right or left. But it's more his mentality, right? Spencer Fano fits the Utah mode completely. Talking about a guy 6'5", 305, but can really move his feet. Violent hands, great kick step when he's pass protecting, a great down blocker in the gap schemes, really good on doubles, really good on getting his eyes up, incredibly does a really nice job with the guard, vertically displacing those guys on double teams. Love his violence and everything he does. His hands, he's got great get off. Like you always hear about defensive line getting off the football. He's got great get off. He gets into that D lineman really, really, really well. I just like, in terms of what, like we talked about what the Browns are going to try to do and the things I'm going to look for at camp and watching that offensive line. Spencer Fano is a guy who's not trying to block you. He's trying to knock you down. And everybody always asks me, what's the difference between the Browns with Callahan and the Browns last year? You know, they did a nice job up front. They just weren't nasty, and it wasn't all the coach's fault. This Fano kid is, as an offensive coordinator, you run behind guys like this. This is when you say you're at a 4th and 1, you're giving it to your best back behind this guy. This is a guy who has 1-2. This is a guy who's nasty. He's athletic. He all the terms we talk about, right? The buzzwords, short area quickness, lateral quickness, all those things that he has all those. And I'm assuming we all get that. This is a guy who is nasty. And up front, you have to have all those physical tools. But this guy has a mentality to knock you down. One of my favorites so far on film. So you're right. I'm not going to go with the skill guy. There's lots of those guys. I'm gonna stay boring into my roots, and I'm going Spencer Fano out of Utah.
So one of the sneaky storylines for the Browns going through this season, obviously we talk a lot about DeJuan Jones and whether he'll transition into left tackle and all of that. But just overall, one of the sneaky storylines is the Browns are kind of in transition on this offensive line. Joel Bitonio's basically year to year. Ethan Posick contract year. Wyatt Teller contract year. Jack Conklin contract year. DeJuan Jones, we don't know if he can play left tackle for 17 games in the NFL. So I think any offensive line talk, Tim, whether we're talking about tackles, whether we're talking about interior guys, I think it all matters with this football team because this line could look very different a year from now.
100%. And that's, I think that what Lance was kind of talking about, this is going to be the theme of this draft, at least as of right now. If you need help on the lines, either line, this draft is for you. I mean, even looking at Utah, they got another tackle, Caleb Lomu. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it.
Yep, you got it.
Lomu? Okay. Because
Mm-hmm.
I know there was
that's why I'm saying it too. So we could both be wrong. So that's why I'm going with it.
Because I now from the recesses of my mind, I'm thinking of a rugby player from New Zealand back in the day, Jonah Lamu. There's probably no relation. It's just a coincidence. But I think with this draft, there's going to be guys I don't mention. Caden Proctor from Alabama, Isaiah World from Oregon. There's a lot of really good offensive linemen in this class. And kind of going back to what, Lance was talking about with Spencer Fano. Utah is like is another one of those programs where if you love running teams, this is a program for you. I mean, they won back-to-back Big 12 Pac-12 titles based on running the football. They beat up on Caleb Williams and USC because in the Pac-12 championship, I think it was in 2021, the year that they played Ohio State, by being a physical team and just running through people. So 100%, Kyle Whittingham bases his program on physicality. So it's no surprise that Utah has a really good offensive line. It's just amazing where you could be in a season where you have not one, but two offensive tackles that go in the first round. And Dan, when you were kind of talking about with the Browns, what they need, I do think both tackles have to be in consideration, especially if maybe less so if DeJuan Jones can nail down left tackle, because you do know that Jack Conklin, as good, as solid as he was in 2024, as available as he was in 2024, you do have to start adding depth you had to start worrying about, I think, both tackle positions, not just the left, but also the right.
Yeah, one of the sneaky moves they made was bringing in Tevin Jenkins, who's kind of a young guy. You just wonder if they're doing that with this idea of probably gonna have to replace Batonio next year, probably gonna have to replace Teller, maybe. This guy gives us somebody young that we can put in our system for a year and kind of develop. So anyway, that's a topic for another day. Tim, why don't you give us a prospect you like?
Well, let me stick with the offensive line and another coach known for the offensive line, Francis Maui Noah from Miami, 6'6", 315. Now, he's a right tackle, so I kind of teased it a little bit when I was talking about Jack Conklin, but I think, these days in the NFL, right tackle is becoming almost as important as left tackle. And I think with Francis Maui Noah, this is a guy who started, from day one when he got to Miami, a 2-year starter at right tackle. This is a big guy, but he's also very mobile. I think if there's a play you can watch where I think it was in 2023 when they had Brashard Smith, who transferred to SMU, became a 6th-round draft pick. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember off the top of my head who drafted him. But you'll see on this play that Maui Noah runs 12 yards past the line of scrimmage to get a pancake block. He gets an initial block and then goes 12 yards up the field for a pancake block. I mean, what NFL team wouldn't see that and be salivating at the possibility of getting a guy like Francis Maui Noah as a freshman to do that? That's incredible. So I look at Maui Noah. I've talked about this before. The one thing I value above everything else with offensive linemen is mobility. And with the Browns, in this outside zone style scheme, you got to be able to move your feet. And Maui Noah absolutely moves very well in space. I talked about the pancake block, and he was also very, very good in protection. PFF had him with just a combined 2 quarterbacks hits/sacks last season. That's in 534 snaps. So only 2 times did he get credited with a hit against Cam Ward, which is just incredible if you think about it. Yet his hands, I do think, need some work. That's something he could focus on. But what I see with him as a pass blocker as well is really good. Like, he is going to play through the whistle. Like, he is relentless. And there are times where he'll just stuff an edge rusher. He'll just completely stop him, and he keeps on blocking. He doesn't stop. And I think that's some really, really good stuff that you see out of him.
Lance, we are sticking with some offensive line talk. So this is just right in your wheelhouse.
Well, Maui Noah is, first of all, he's I said it earlier, he's a get off the bus guy first, right? You're talking about a guy they say has under 20% body fat. Has been clocked at 20 miles per hour. The GPS running, which is just on the catapult system they use now when you're training. He's a freakish athlete. Now, the thing that really separates for me, and I agree with Tim in his movement skills, he's a knee bender. He's not a waist bender. And a lot of times as an offensive lineman, you get caught kind of leaning over. And when you get caught leaning over, you get beat. You get beat around the edge. You get beat in space by a linebacker when you get to the second level. By bending his knees, he keeps his chest up. And when you keep your chest up, you can get contact with guys at the second level. You can make sure that you can set the edge with your feet. He's got tremendously quick feet. He kind of looks like a big tight end when you see him play. He has those physical traits. He kind of fits the mold of what an NFL lineman. One of the things I wish when you go down to watch Browns practice is that the guys don't look like linemen per se, right? So when you say I'm dating myself, you think about the old school linemen, 300 pounds, and they look like, you're like, there's an O-line guy. And there are some guys like that in the NFL, but there's a lot of guys that look like big tight ends. And what I mean by that is they're They're very lean. They're very athletic. They're very light on their feet. This is a guy that can move. This is a guy that can pass protect. He also, usually when you get those, like for example, DeJuan Jones is not a killer. DeJuan Jones, when you talk about run blocking in the wide zone, and Dan, we were talking about in our other pod, is he can get in the way. This guy's a big human now, but he'll try to knock you down too. So he's got the best of both worlds, where he can finesse you and be athletic, but he can also down block you. So you can run zone, you can run gap, you can double team with him. He can do a lot of things. When he gets there, he gets angry. My dad always said, arrive and arrive angry as an offensive lineman, and he does that. So really good offensive lineman. Tim said it best. There's a lot of guys that are really good this year up front. On both sides of the ball.
And again, like we mentioned with the quarterbacks, if you've got 2 first-round picks, and let's say they don't need to take a quarterback with one of them, you've got to think that offensive line would be in play. And we know that Andrew Berry likes to take big guys with those first-round picks especially. So, Lance, let's move along. Give us another name.
Well, there's some receivers that I like out there, but I try once again. I like easy yard receivers. I like the guys you can get the ball in space to, and you don't have to do a lot. And what I mean by that is so much of what the Browns do. We'll use the Browns as an example. They have to be perfect on every play. And in the NFL, college, high school, go 12 to 15 plays every time you have it. It's really hard to do without making a mistake, getting a turnover, etc. So Eric Singleton, receiver out of Auburn, got 5'11". Runs a 4.3, ran a 10.6, 800 in high school, 104 receptions, 1,000 yards, almost 1,500 yards. But here's what I like about him. He's not a route guy. And you guys hear me say this all the time. If you're a guy who's an outside one receiver, routes are so important. But you got to have touch guys, right? You got to have guys that you don't do a lot for and they just get it in space. I'm going to use an example this year going, Dan, we were down at all those camps. Right? Luke Floria, not a great talent. I'm not talking he's that type of talent, but he's a space guy. You don't have to do a lot for him, right? And this is what Eric Singleton gives you. You hear me say it all the time, the word twitchy and sudden. He's as twitchy and sudden as anybody in the draft. He's a guy that you can throw simple routes to, and he's going to get you. Not only is he going to get you the big play, right, once in a while, just by getting it out to him, but what he does, he's an extension of the run. So that 7th, 8th guy in the box that stops the run, you can block that guy by throwing simple routes, right? Bubble screens, quick slants, the RPOs. Not necessarily an RPO, just if they're not honoring that guy in the box, right? He can put him in the slot. He's just a guy, when you watch him on film, he's electric, right? If the Browns are not going to be great on offense, if they're going to go with this power control, then you got to win the other two. You got to win special teams. You got to win defense. If they need impact on special teams, they need an impact returner. They need an impact kick returner, punt returner. This guy can do so many things, and he's just electric in space. And I love sudden twitchy guys. I was never very smart as an offense coordinator, but the one thing I always did was get it to guys in space who can do stuff with it, right? Because then you look really smart, right? Because you throw it 5 yards and those guys run 50. So I'm a big believer in those twitchy guys that you just throw a little simple route to, and they do it all the work for you. So Eric Singleton, receiver, twitchy, love him, slot, small, fast, as electric as it gets in this year's draft.
Tim, I thought I saw a little smile kind of pop up there when Lance brought this name up.
I had notes on Singleton too, so we were thinking alike on there. I was looking through this receiver class, and I 100% on board with Lance on here with Eric Singleton Jr. Now he's going to Auburn, so chance to play in Hugh Freeze's offense. Certainly, I think he's going to get more opportunities. But yeah, no, that was a guy I was getting ready to talk about too. So I guess great minds think alike. So in my mind, I'm pivoting to the next guy.
We'll go for it. Let's get to that next guy.
All right, I'll go with an easy one. I don't know if it's necessarily a fit for the Browns because they already have a guy with a similar build, but I'll go Carnell Tate. The third receiver. He didn't get as much love as Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith have, but I think Carnell Tate is very good in his own right. A guy with decent size. Just looking at it right here, 6'3", 191 pounds. Good season last year, 733 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was really good in the game against Texas in the Cotton Bowl when really Texas did a great job of daring Will Howard and Ohio State to go to anybody but Jeremiah Smith. And Carnell Tate stepped up. He had a really good game, 7 catches, 87 yards. And, he was pretty good there. I think he got overshadowed a lot, obviously, by Jeremiah Smith, by the running backs, by Emeka Egbuka. Now he's going to step into a number 2 role at Ohio State, a receiver next season. I look at Tate. He's not going to wow anybody with speed, but I think he's got good size. And And more importantly, I think he knows how to use it. Good build. I would love to see him add more weight. Plus, we all know what Brian Hartline does at Ohio State for developing wide receivers. So I think there's a lot. The arrow, I think, is pointing up with Carnell Tate. And with this receiver class in general, this is a class where I don't think there's a super duper standout. There's guys that can rise up. I think Lance was talking about Nick Harbor. He was talking about on last podcast, and yeah, I mean, that's a guy, and we can certainly talk about him as well, a guy that I've never seen a track athlete look, just more different than every other sprinter outside of Nick Chubb. So I think that's certainly a guy we could talk about as well. But I think as far as just, more of a steak, not sizzle receiver, I think Carnell Tate can certainly be that guy, and no reason not to trust Ohio State and how they develop receivers.
Lance, I mean, what are your thoughts on both those guys then, Tate and Harbor?
Well, Tate, it's funny how talented Ohio State is. He might be the number one receiver off the board next year, and he's the second best receiver on his college team, but he does everything well. Now, I agree, Tim's spot on in terms of Browns have those body types, right? 6'3" and 190 range. So they had that outside one receiver with Judy and Seth Tillman. He kind of reminds you of Seth Tillman in his body type, right? And how he uses his length and how he gets open and things like that. He does a lot of things really, really well. And the way I always grade outside receivers for me is your ability to get off not only press coverage, but how do you attack angles and body and blind spots and zone coverage. Then at the catch point, he's very good. He's also a little bit underrated at run after catch. So he's a guy that doesn't do maybe anything at an A+ level, but you can win a lot of games with receivers who do everything at a B level, which he does. He's very good at all three levels of a receiver. Now, Nick Harbor, one of the terms we're going to use a bunch is off the bus, right? So Nick Harbor goes to the front seat of the off the bus team. You're talking about a guy who's 6'5", 235 to 240. He's been clocked in the high 4.2s, 4.3s. This is a freak. I think I told you guys, I sent you that text, a freakazoid of freaks, right? It's not even a word. But once again, for me, it's hard to break him down. I want him to have a big year because that's potential over production, right? He only has 36 receptions in 2 years. That tells you he's got to go out and make more plays. They also have to give him the football. And once again, here's what really smart offensive coordinators do. And there's lots of schemes and there's lots of what everybody does. And when I was outstanding as offense coordinators, because I had really good players. And when I had really good players, they touched it, right? I didn't waste throws on, I don't want to say waste throws because that's inappropriate, but the best guys on my football team touched it. And that's what really good coordinators do. And Nick Harbor's a guy who could shoot up he's DK Metcalf, but faster and bigger, and it's kind of scary to think that, but he really is. He's as scary as it gets athletically.
I would go a step further as just athleticism. I think he's a freakier athlete than Calvin Johnson. Obviously, he's not nearly as good as Calvin Johnson, but how many 6'5", 235 guys are there that are sprinters? There aren't any.
Running sub 10, sub 11 in the 100. That's crazy. That's really fast.
I mean, like that's tight end size we're talking about. That's That's like linebacker / sub package defensive end size that we're talking about here with Nick Harbor. Now, yeah, he has to develop, I want to see more of him. With Lenora Sellers, I want to see him really have a breakout season because if he performs the way he has, we're going to have a year with 2 receiving unicorns in as many years, and for different reasons. Travis Hunter, I think, was the most incredible athlete I've ever seen because he's a guy who can rack up 100+ snaps on both sides of the football. Nick Harbor might be the best athlete we ever seen. The fact that how do you cover him if he hits his potential? I mean, we talk about, there's so many times talk about good tight ends can't be covered by corners because they're too small, or linebackers or safeties because they're too slow. What do you do with Nick Harbor if he becomes really good? That's one of the most underrated storylines I think of the entire draft cycle is what his level is in 2025.
Okay, let's keep rolling along. Lance, give us another name.
Caleb Downs. I think, now this, not only is he outstanding, but you talk about, what the Browns needed, that one high hat safety. I think we all agree that Delpit, with motion, with different formations, you're going to get a guy. You obviously have to play both the one high hat and you have to play down the box. So you got to have some flexibility there. But for the most part, Delpit has shown, and Schwartz is a very smart guy. Delpit has shown that he's a game changer down inside the line of scrimmage, right? Playing within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. They need a ball hawk at that free safety who can come down and be the last line of defense. Caleb Downs arguably is the best guy in the draft next year because of his skill set. It's also a really high need for the Browns. And I've been asked a lot of times, do you take a position of need or you take athleticism? This is a guy that fits both for the Browns. So if this guy's around for the Browns, and they don't get the production at free safety they want this year. That's where I thought they were going in round 3 with Xavier Watts, because he was my favorite safety last year. Caleb Downs is a better version of Xavier Watts. Caleb Downs, all the physical tools you want. Especially, I think he would be elite as a one hi-hat, right? And there's not a lot of one hi-hat teams in the NFL that are predominantly, everybody plays it, but as their base, like the Browns. So I love Caleb Downs. I think he's got all the tools, physical in the run game, runs the alley, sideline to sideline, can tackle, ball hawk, great ball skills, spatial awareness, all those tech words we use. He's as good as it gets. Another fun film breakdown.
Tim, how good is Downs, do you think?
Kyle Hamilton good. And what I hope with Caleb Downs is he doesn't have a similar fall to Kyle Hamilton did in 2022. I mean, how many teams in that draft wish they could have a do-over? Maybe the Lions are the one that sticks out on my mind as the team that doesn't really want to have a do-over of that draft, because I mean, how many of those teams wish they could have a player as impactful as Kyle Hamilton has been for the Ravens? And yeah, even looking at this list, obviously the Jets I think would be okay with it because they got Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson. The Lions obviously got Aiden Hutchinson, Drake London to the Falcons, Chris Olave to the Saints, Jamison Williams to the Lions. I'm sure even they might want to go with Caleb Downs, but I think with Downs you have an incredible safety, a guy who incredibly athletic. You saw the punt return he had for a touchdown against Indiana, which I think was the game-changing play. That's a display of just how athletic he is. He's also incredibly smart as well. Can play the run, the pass incredibly well. Everybody talks about that Jack Sawyer strip sack and score in the Cotton Bowl. Don't forget on that 2nd and goal, the play that everybody, rips Steve Sarkisian in Texas on, that toss to the left to Trey Wisner. Caleb Downs helps blow that play up. He gets tackled on that play, but he kind of blows that up and lets Lathan Ransom and Davison Igbinosun, finish off that play. I don't know if that happens if Caleb Downs doesn't read it and attack it. You're looking at a guy who can just do everything at the safety position. And I think from a Browns perspective, I know we talked, at the beginning of this podcast about offensive linemen. I think there also has to be the preparation for the possibility that, regardless of, whatever needs they have on offense, say they go quarterback with that first pick, we know Andrew Berry values defense early. We talked, with taking Mason Graham and Carson Schlesinger with his first 2 picks in 2025, despite all these needs they have on offense. I think we have to, understand that Andrew Berry could just as easily go defense. It's clear he prioritizes that. There's going to be needs, I think, on defense going into this draft. So certainly, I think if you left this draft with, say, a Lenore Settlers and a Caleb Downs, I don't think any Browns fans should be that disappointed.
All right, let's go through a couple more names here. Tim, give us another one.
I'm going with another guy that, could be a first-round option on defensive line, and that's TJ Parker, the edge rusher from Clemson, 6'3", 265. I hinted yesterday how good Clemson's going to be. I didn't mention Avion Terrell, the younger brother of AJ Terrell, the Clemson corner, who is also very good, but TJ Parker, for me, is the star of this defense, along with Peter Woods, the defensive tackle, 6'3", 265. And I've never done this before going through stats. I had to all cap something. So in 2024, 11 sacks, 20 tackles for loss. And here's the all cap: 6 forced fumbles. 6. This guy clearly has a nose for hunting the football. He just goes and attacks it so incredibly well off the edge. And I really loved how Clemson used him last year. They lined him up all over the place on the line, left side, right side, even up the middle. They moved him all over the place, and you just see just how relentless he is. He gets after it, and like I said, his hands are also really good. His hands are much more refined than you typically see from a college edge rusher. So with Parker, he may not be the all-world athlete you would typically see early in the draft, but I think he's more than good enough. And that ability to go hunt the football, to go pop it free, you can't place a value on that. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my mind, stand out because how many times have their edge rushers not only try to sack you, but they also try to rip the ball out? That's why I feel like if they were in a position to take an edge rusher, this would be the guy they would want to target because he just has such an ability to pop that football out. And I know the Browns have tried, later round options, to get another defensive end opposite Myles Garrett, Alex Wright, he's in the last year of his rookie deal. Isaiah McGuire's got one more year left. They got Joe Tryon Shoyinka, as a free agent. So certainly they might not need an edge rusher, and this might be a moot point, but I think TJ Parker certainly has a case for being the number 1 edge in this class. And what I'm also excited for, Clemson hired Tom Allen as their defensive coordinator, did a great job with Penn State last year. I'm excited for how Tom Allen is going to deploy TJ Parker this coming fall.
I will say, when we talk about the fallout of the Deshaun Watson trade, obviously not having those 3 first-round picks is a big part of it. And one of the things I've thought is, okay, that's taken you out of the running to really use a high-value pick to address whether it's receiver or edge rusher or offensive line. And without going through each of those picks and where they ended up and who was available, just the reality of not being able to add that elite level of talent high in the draft at high value positions, and edge rusher is one of those spots, Lance. And we're going to get some answers on some of these guys, right? Maybe one of these, maybe Alex Wright or Isaiah McGuire or Tryon Shoyinka, maybe they emerge, or maybe the Browns are looking for a number 2 edge rusher next year. But again, this is one of those spots that you circle with 2 first-round picks that you might really value here. And again, Andrew Berry, Tim mentioned him, valuing taking defensive guys. He also likes taking big guys with those early picks. So edge rushers right there.
Well, I think, when they got rid of Obo and they got rid of Dalvin Thompson, it kind of tells you where they're going with Tryon Shoyinka and obviously Alex Wright and obviously Isaiah McGuire. And then with the rest of the guys, right? Mason Graham. The biggest pickup, in my opinion, they got this offseason, Malik Collins. So impressed with him, getting a chance to watch him up close during camp this past summer. Obviously, it all counts with the pads go on, but just his movement skills. So I think Tim is right in terms of this guy's potential and what he could be, but it also tells you where the Browns want to be in terms of the depth of the D-line and the type of guys they want. Now they have all guys who are long. They have all guys who can play multiple positions. They're position flexible. They have multiple guys who are really good with their hands. They can 2-gap if needed, but they can do what Jim Schwartz likes to do, and that's penetrate, get upfield, and to steal your thunder. Dan, is that then those linebackers just clean up like punt guys, right? They can cover those guys because that defensive line will be fresh. They're big body guys. They're going to be in the backfield penetrating one gap, and there's a bunch of guys in this draft, edge guys, like you said, that can make that happen. But it kind of tells you can't be a one-trick pony, right? Obo was more of just a pass rusher, but undersized. Dalvin Thompson, who I loved, is just a run stopper, but couldn't rush the passer. Now they have all the guys, both inside and out, that can do both of those things. And I think their defensive line has really improved. And I told you this last week, Dan, I think they're a top 3 to 5 defensive line, and they're drastically improved from last year. And I thought last year they were solid. But I think they're even better than 2 years ago.
And last call here on guys you want to shout out, Lance. Give us, if you got 1, 2, whatever, real quick. Let's lightning round these guys.
Jeremiah Love from tailback Notre Dame. Love his versatility. Can do all the things out of the backfield. I think it could be a third down back, but I also think he can carry the load. He's really, really good in space, short area bursts. And then I got to throw another lineman out there, Jake Slaughter. Center, because I think the Browns, once again, they're going to have to improve. Slaughter's a guy who's so good with his hands, really smart, can is big enough to handle that nose if they're in a tight or odd front, athletic enough to get to the second level if they're an even front, good in pass protection, steps back, keeps his head back, really good player. So those are other 2 guys, Jeremiah Love and Slaughter, the center. Are 2 guys that I really like.
Tim?
How would you guys feel if I told you there might be a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah 2.0 in this upcoming draft, potentially?
Sign me up.
Well, I know you talked about, a Perkins at linebacker, Centarian Perkins from Ole Miss. I think there's a Perkins that's even better in this draft. That's LSU's Harold Perkins Jr., 6'1", 225 pounds. I think before the 2024 season started, there was talk Perkins might have been the best defensive player in the country because this guy was a monster in his first 2 seasons in college. 147 tackles, 13 sacks, 26 tackles for loss, 7 pass breakups, 7 forced fumbles, 2 picks, 7 pass breakups. Only played 4 games last season because of a torn ACL, and that's a big reason why he's back at Ole Miss in 2025. But I think with Harold Perkins, he might be the ultimate Swiss Army knife defender in this draft class because when you look at him, PFF tracked him 200 plus snaps in so many different areas, line of scrimmage, in the box, even in the nickel area, in kind of as a slot defender. So they used him all over the place, and they used him all over the place because this is a guy who could do basically everything. He's just a playmaker. He's explosive and he's incredibly intelligent. High-end football IQ we're talking about. But the reason I say he's like JOK 2.0, I think he's a better pass rusher than JOK was. This is a guy that you could put on the defensive line in certain situations and just turn him loose on offensive linemen. You could blitz him. You could do all sorts of different things, and you get him in the hands of the right defensive coordinator, and you have a guy who can be absolutely terrifying out there against opposing offenses. Now, size is always going to be a concern. I mean, again, 6'1", 225, especially if you want to use him like Micah Parsons. He's not Micah Parsons. Like I said, I think he's closer to JOK with better pass rush tools than Micah Parsons. But when you talk about those kind of guys that you can use all over the defense, kind of how JOK had been used in some ways, how I think people thought Isaiah Simmons could be used when he got drafted 8th overall by the Cardinals, that kind of idea of a linebacker is what I think Harold Perkins is. And what I'm going to be fascinated in is, how does he look a year off the torn ACL? If he looks as good, close to what he did in 2022 and 2023, I think you're talking about a guy who, after what we've seen JOK become prior to, his unfortunate neck injury against the Ravens, and you hope he can return to the field one day. But I would think after the success he had, teams are going to look at Harold Perkins and say, we don't want to let that guy go. We don't want to pass on another JOK. Let's just take him and just turn him loose. Because I think just a guy who could do everything out there from the linebacker position is just so enticing.
Yeah, and I remember when Harold Perkins first kind of burst onto the scene. I mean, like you were saying, Tim, it was, oh my God, this guy is going to be that next high pick defender. Obviously that train slowed a little bit, but here we are, Lance. He's got an opportunity to kind of rekindle that here after that injury.
I love him, and I have him in the same boat as Anthony Hill, linebacker from Texas. Those type of skill set, right? Guys who can rush, guys who can play multiple positions. They're positionless, right? And if you look at defenses that fit those guys, it's guys that don't play linebackers D-line. They play the first level, second level, third level, right? And he's a guy who can play on the first and second level, both of those guys. Perkins is a playmaker. Perkins is a guy who can do a lot of things like Tim said. Tim described him perfectly. He's a guy that's just really, he's kind of unique in how he does things. I always like linebackers when they blitz, they get skinny and they don't give you a lot of surface area. Perkins is a master of that. If you watch JOK does that very well too. So Anthony Hill's a little bit bigger, but Perkins is an elite guy who is really tough to block and can do a lot of things. Would be interested to see him with Schwartz, by the way. That would be pretty perfect fit for him.
Okay, there we go. Our little draft preview here in July, about a week, 2 weeks out from training camp here. Browns are kicking things off shortly, but we wanted to get you some draft names to watch as college football is going to be kicking off here as well. And I think Saturdays are going to matter just as much as Sundays for Browns fans. Lance, you might disagree with me on this, but I think by about November, kind of going into December, I think those Saturday games are going to matter a little more to Browns fans than the Sunday games. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yep. Find us on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter's Orange Brown Talk. Our YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com, putting full pods up there so you can check that out if you want to watch us instead of just listen to us. Again, that's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And of course, if you're not subscribed here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, get subscribed. We're going to be going right back to 5, maybe 6 days a week once training camp kicks off and through the season. So you want to make sure you're subscribed in all of those places. And one last thing, Football Insider, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. For Lance and Tim, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.